morning, everybody, and welcome to It's a New Day. You're listening to 1180 WFYL. Tim Liebig in the studio this morning, and we are so glad that you're with us. Our guest today on this half hour is going to be our friend Jeff Clayton, and Jeff is the executive director of the American Bail Coalition. Jeff, you with us?
I am. Thanks for having me on, Tim.
Well, thanks for being here. And Jeff, in case our listeners have not met you before, please let's tell them a little bit about yourself and the American Bail Coalition, please.
Absolutely. I'm a former practicing attorney. Don't hold that against me. Public policy expert on criminal justice policy for many years. I'm the executive director of the American Bail Coalition, as you mentioned, which is a trade association of insurance companies who underwrite criminal bail bondsmen throughout the country. So for the last 5 or 6 years, we've been working on the issue of bail reform in the United States, and particularly in the state of New York.
Now, there are things going on in the state of New York, and I see some of the things that your company has been following along. But there's one in particular that's going on right now. There was a release that came out January 15th for New York. You want to fill us in a little bit on what's going on up there?
Absolutely. So the bail reform has been a popular conversation, throughout the United States. Many states are doing reforms. Many states are changing the way that bail is done to allow prosecutors to detain people in lieu of posting bail, in addition to releasing, other people. What the state of New York has done has said that there can only be bail for a very limited amount of offenses. And everybody else pretty much gets out on a get out of jail free card. And so what we're seeing in New York is some fairly serious offenses. You've got bank robbers, anti-Semitic hate crime acts going on, and people that are just getting released over and over again on some pretty serious crimes, including criminally negligent homicide and others. And so it was sold as sort of a reform to help low-level misdemeanor bail people who couldn't afford, to post bail. But what it's turned into is something, much bigger than folks had realized.
So the problem that we're having right now is there's going to be a lot more higher offenses that are going to be out on the street.
Absolutely. And I think, the case that I think kind of rattled many cages in the State House in Albany and everywhere else is a 6-time bank robber who robbed 6 banks within 16 days within New York, released on his own recognizance until finally the feds eventually indicted him and picked him up to stop the madness. And as it turned out, because he robbed a bank using a note and the teller didn't verify that he had a gun or not, it was considered a nonviolent offense. And so he was released under bail reform. So we've got continuing situations like that where it's just head scratchers, where in no other state would this person be able to be released from jail.
Well, now let me ask you a question. Now here we are. We're in Pennsylvania. You're reaching us out of Colorado, and this is going on up in New York. How many states are having a real problem with this right now?
Well, really, I'd say it's New York, Delaware, to a certain extent, New Hampshire, but nothing like we've seen here. And the reason is because judges in cases where the person is a flight risk or a danger will impose a bail, and if they don't post it, they don't get out. And so ultimately, after you rob the 5th bank and the judge realizes that it's not going to stop you, you can do something. So other states who have done bail reform, like New Jersey and New Mexico, have given expanded powers to prosecutors to file motions to detain people without bail, to say this guy's just too dangerous. New York didn't do that. And so they just have a situation where they're releasing way too many dangerous people, and there's really nothing prosecutors can do about it.
Well, now you mentioned about, the feds going after somebody. Now, is that because a prosecutor stepped up and said, hey, we need some help with this situation?
Yeah, absolutely. And the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of New York issued a statement condemning the state's bail policies and saying that the feds finally, had to stop in to do something because they were going to continue to let this guy rob more banks. In fact, the bank robber himself, when he was caught, and this is on the front page of the New York Post, said to the police, I can't believe you're letting me out again. I can't believe you're doing this. And so, you can't write this stuff at a certain point.
It's amazing that anybody. Well, let me. it's clearly it's happening. So the question is going to be, well, why? Why is this happening? Who thinks it's a good idea? There's got to be some reason behind it. It's usually money motivated. What is the purpose of what New York is going through right now?
Well, I think there was concern, and it was rightfully so, that there were some of these low-level offenders being held, not just because they couldn't post bail, but being held on low-level probation holds for low-level cases, in some cases for years in jail and not getting to trial. And so there was a lot of concern, and I think their heart was in the right place, but they really clearly didn't think this one through, and they went way too far. In other states, there's exceptions. If the person is a flight risk or the person, is a danger to the community, judges can say, okay, well, we can't let them out on their own recognizance this time. And unfortunately, they just made the presumption a little bit too strong. And if they were to soften it, I think judges would, be able to correct some of these outliers that we're seeing.
Well, now let me just, folks, I just want to read, the dedication. I like what your group puts in as kind of the mission. The American Bail Coalition, dedicated to protecting the constitutional right to bail and the promotion, protection, advancement of the surety bail profession in the United States. Comprised of the nation's largest surety insurance companies, American Bail Coalition works with local communities, law enforcement, legislators, and other crime justice stakeholders to utilize its expertise and knowledge of the surety bail industry and to develop more effective and efficient criminal justice solutions. So I don't know of any other organization that is doing what you're doing. Is that fair to say? I
think so. And, you got to realize, too, is that not all bail is bail bondsman. And so we are protecting the fundamental right to bail under the Eighth Amendment and state constitutions for everyone, whether you're ever going to use a bail bondsman or not. And I think that's important. So in some of the laws that were passed in New York, or what created to abolish cash bail, is that what they're trying to do? Yeah, that was the original intent. And certainly they backed off of it a little bit. But at the end of the day, they pretty much have eliminated 80 to 90% of bail, which means all the people get out, and some, the ones that would have had to post bail don't. And so there's no accountability of a bail bondsman has arrest powers to bring them back to court. So, the question is going to be, how does this get fixed? Well, it's most likely going to happen, I think, through the budget process, which will be ongoing through April. I've been up to Albany a couple of times already, had conversations with various groups. Something's going to give, and it's just a question as to what and how far is it going to go. I think some folks want to just let the reforms play themselves out, but I think even the governor has said changes need to be made. The attorney general is putting together a package that she's going to put out, believing changes are necessary. So I think, through the sausage making the political process, we'll probably see something within a probably month or two period. And this is something that just came out, right? This is like January 1st, 2020. Now this is happening, and so many people are, shall we say, taking advantage of the program? Yeah, people are taking advantage, and the general public just didn't realize that 6-time bank robbers are going to be out on the streets, that, somebody can go commit anti-Semitic attacks in New York City and be released and do it again. And so that, that just was not acceptable to people, and people just didn't think this law went that far. And, it's one thing to say that we want to, protect indigent people processing through the criminal justice system. But, this gives criminals who have money and who don't a free pass. And I think people realize that's a problem. Yeah, there was a couple of the now there was a release with this information that came out. I was really surprised to read this. In one case, you just kind of mentioned this a bit. A string of anti-Semitic attacks in New York City also has residents on high alert. Tiffany Harris was arrested 3 times in 1 week. She attacked 3 Jewish women in one incident, screaming profanities, punched another for no apparent reason the day following, and she was released twice under the new laws and was arrested a 3rd time when she attacked her social worker. That's what's happening under this program. That's what's happening. And the other thing that we're not talking about is animal abuse cases. We know from experience in domestic violence that when you commit hate crimes, you commit domestic violence, and you commit abuses against animals, that you're a dangerous person. And what do we do in New York? We just say, well, we'll see you next time, which, could be a mere 4 hours later, as in the case of the bank robber.
Man, it's just unbelievable. Well, some of the things are like you said. The idea is, here's a great idea. Some of these low-level offenders, cut them a little bit of a break. These are like thinking first-time offenders, things like that. But now, was this law somebody that people voted on, or how did this law come to be in the first place?
Well, it was passed through the budget, and so it didn't go through the normal process of hearings that a normal bill would in any state legislature. And I was at the hearing on this. I mean, it was a mere, hour or two long to consider this entire issue. Some have alleged that it was passed sort of in the middle of the night, but that's how the budget gets passed in New York. So the reality is that the public never really had any major input on this, that it came down from the legislature and the administration, and this is what got put out and this is what passed. And I'm not even sure how long the language was out for even public scrutiny before it passed, but it wasn't very long. So that was the reality. It's just kind of a bad process.
So now the public's finding out about it the wrong way. They're finding out the results of it because of the wrong people being released into their own recognizance out on the streets with God knows whatever else they're going to do. Now, the other thing is if these high-level offenders, and they are, a lot of them that are getting released, they could certainly flee, and I'm sure many of them are.
Well, certainly, if you can rob 6 banks and get away with it, you got to think that's going to be a reality that criminals are going to figure out. The other thing is the drug cases. I mean, it's going to be really hard to get drug traffickers the way this is set up because there's going to be no bail for any of them, and very difficult for prosecutors to comply. And the other thing you got to keep in mind is they did a major reform on discovery violations, discovery in criminal cases. And so you've got counties hemorrhaging all kinds of dollars to comply with other criminal justice reforms at the very same time this is going. So it's just kind of the perfect storm of criminal justice reform.
Now, what's the next step that we have to take?
Well, I think, what we've seen is that, and we'd like to claim that, we're, getting the message out to the public. But the reality is the public in New York's finding out, regardless of what we or anybody does. And so people just need to contact their legislators and let them know that they're unhappy with this. What I think is going to happen is there'll be scrutiny on this, media scrutiny on this at the national and even state levels for the next couple of months until the changes are made. And I think we will see some changes.
Well, and that's the reason you're on with me. You're going to be on with, I'm sure you're doing a lot of interviews and getting the word out there as quickly and as forcefully as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't want other states to make this mistake. And we're pointing that out as well, that there's a reasonable pathway on these bail reform issues. This is not it.
Well, give me some examples or share with our listeners some examples of other successes that your organization has had that you think will shine brightly in this New York situation.
Well, I think that we have stood against using bail as a collections mechanism rather than to guarantee people's appearance in court. We've stood for due process rights, meaning people shouldn't languish in jail. People should be heard. Other states, we are arguing for expedited dockets for people who are in custody, so they spend less time in jail. And other meaningful reforms depending on the state. Colorado, for example, low-level cases, we have a presumption of a release on their own recognizance unless they, fail to appear, and then a judge would have discretion. So there's many ways to skin the cat, so to speak. And, we want to be part of the process. And really, there was no process in New York that really led to this. And I think, that was another reason why it isn't working very well.
Well, I guess what's going to be the most important is getting the word out there. But I think also what's important is we get our listeners a little bit more of an education exactly how bail works. You just pointed out a few things that's important. What bail was designed to do was to for a low level offender to pretty much guarantee that that they're going to be back for their trial. Is that just like a one-liner?
Absolutely. To secure your parents in court is the reason. It's security for your parents. It's the easiest way to think about it.
Now, is that how most legislators think about it, and they know better? Or,
yeah,
or are they looking at it, a different way? Has it turned into something else? It certainly sounds like it's turned into something else, especially in New York.
Yeah, and the media uses the term cash bail and purchase your freedom and all this sort of stuff. But really, it's security, and it could take many forms. It doesn't have to be a bail bondsman's bond. It could be cash. It could be property. It could be collateral. It could be a promise to pay. It could be all these sorts of things. But it really is security. And most legislators, I think the general public understands it, generally from the game Monopoly. They know get out of jail free. They know not get out of jail free. And that's usually the prism through what most people who are not, in the millennial generation understand bail.
Right, exactly. Now, have there been any, since we first planned this talk, has there been any new updates on this?
No, we've seen some polling numbers today that the support amongst the public for bail reform went from a majority of New Yorkers to now, less than 40%. I think it was the last number was like 37% support the bail reform. So, it's a really popular thing for Governor Cuomo to advance forward. I think, there was an appetite for bail reform, but, the proof's in the pudding, and, the pudding isn't good, at least according to the public.
Yeah, and that's what we're seeing. The most important thing is as these. Well, I guess the thing is we have to find these cases that you are pointing out, and the one that I just read, and there's a few others. These cases have to be found out and have to be brought to the public's attention. And I'm assuming that's one of the things that ABC is trying to do. The American Bail Coalition is trying to do. Is that true?
That's right. And I mean, it's our job to let the public get a view of what the system is, a fair view of what the system is. And of course, the folks on the other side will, expose any number of abuses on the system and try to blame it, on monetary bail, which of course it's not our fault since we don't set bail. But I think, the reality is that the public puts themselves in their own shoes in the system, and that's really not reality. And so what we're trying to do is show that, on the large part, a lot of the people for whom bail is imposed have done, this isn't their first rodeo. They've been down this road any number of times, and judges are doing bail because they don't appear or they have a lengthy rap sheet. That's the reason.
Well, and if they do have a lengthy rap sheet, I'm one of the people. I've never been to court. I've never needed to be to court, right? So I'm always looking. If anything bad were to happen to a seemingly good person, wrong place, wrong time, that might be more who bail is designed for, I would think, or at least this program that New York is trying to put through. I keep calling it a program. This reform is designed for, but of course is not working.
Absolutely. And, if you were wrongfully accused, you want the right to bail. You would call your friends and be like, guys, they got the wrong guy. I didn't do it. Don't worry about it. And that conversation would be had. But here you're right. The people that are profiting from this or benefiting from this are hardened repeat criminals. And we've seen that.
So getting more now. There's going to be more that's going to be happening. How are you finding out the information? There's going to be a lot of those that are going to be trying to keep the whole thing quiet as people are getting out with this bail reform that shouldn't be getting out. How is your group going to be getting this information and getting it out to the public?
Well, we're just acting kind of as a hub of information. I mean, people are sending us all kinds of information. The media is fixated on it. The public might break Twitter on this. I mean, it's just probably the hottest issue in criminal justice going right now. So it's our job just to, give the public the facts and let them decide. And I think by and large, most people that look at this say this is a problem, a big problem.
Well, it's good, and that's. I'm glad to hear you say that. You made a good point. That's something we talk about all the time on WFYL, working for your liberty, and the important thing is to get the facts and let the people decide. And the more of these examples that can be made available to our listeners and to the public, the more that they can speak up and speak up intelligently to the legislators on getting this thing changed. You sound like you feel pretty confident it's going to be changed in in a couple of months. Why do you feel so confident?
Well, I mean, you think you have all, legislative leaders, the governor and the attorney general all saying changes have to be made.
Yeah.
The question's going to be how far are they going to go, right? I mean, if they just said, well, we'll sweep in, criminally negligent homicide and that's it. Well, maybe that's not going far enough, right? So
Right.
That's going to be the question: is how far and how much judicial discretion really are they willing to restore?
Well, you're right, and who's going to make these decisions? They are they going to listen to us? Are they going to listen to their constituents, and are they going to listen to the public when they take all this? There could be people living in certain areas that are living in absolute fear because of this whole thing going on right now.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And certainly if you read the Jewish papers, I mean, there's a lot of fear based on the anti-Semitic acts that are going on, having people on edge, and that's not appropriate. And what was the problem that we were trying to solve? It wasn't this. It was something much less than what this is. And let's go solve the problem we intended to solve, and not weaken accountability to the point where there's actual real fear. One reporter told me, sidebar, off the record, I'm actually afraid for my own family as a result of all of this.
Wow.
And so, this is, we're not making this up. I guess it's a good way to put it. And we and others have been accused of fear mongering here, but, we didn't call the district attorneys and tell them to oppose it. We didn't call victims groups and tell them this was a problem. They did it all on their own. We knew it was going to come because we understood the ramifications of what was in the law, but, nobody listened to us until it happened.
Well, and that's the problem. That's the problem a lot of times. You don't find out how in the weeds you are until you can't see daylight anymore. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, I guess we have a problem. How quickly can it be shut down? Now, this law's been put into place January 1st. How quickly could, like you said, certain parts of it's going to be, probably trimmed and, well, we got to add this to it. We have to add this to it. We have to add this to it. What if it was, is there going to be an option where this can just be shut down, at least temporarily, until it can be reworked?
Yeah, they could do that overnight now that the legislature's in session. And then to your other point, that you're ignored. I like to either think, I'm niche and not ignored rather than being ignored and not niche. But you're right. People assume the best out of every law and they never assume the worst. And, this kind of caught them, unexpected, I think.
Well, I think, like a lot of laws, and like a lot of legislators, they're trying to please everybody. And you're not going to please everybody. You cannot please everybody. Goes back to some of our greatest presidents before the Civil War. You're not going to please everybody, and you try to put a law into place. It's hard to believe that people put things into place without thinking of both sides. Or my question is, or did they?
Yeah, I don't think they did. And I think you're right. I think, criminal justice issues are, tough for politicians. They always think they're going to just fix everything and we can make it easier for everybody and, everything will work itself out. But there's a reason why, ask Michael Dukakis about that, the Willie Horton case. There's reasons people become president and don't because of these crime issues. The Crime Control Bill Act of 1994 that President Clinton passed. Well, he knew he needed that because he had to have a little bit more moderate credentials to win in the mid 90s, and he did. So, the public does care about crime issues. It was the one thing a colleague of mine and I were discussing today. If you look at what's going on in New York, you can tell the public does ultimately care about crime issues. And maybe they've been asleep at the wheel for the last few years, but I think they're starting to wake up and say, this is wrong and we're not going to put up with this.
Well, you make a great point, because there's a lot of people. It's another thing. I think about this all the time, and I don't want to. I hate to say the word lazy. And listeners, I've said this before, and I apologize. I'm not accusing anybody of being lazy, but sometimes we don't want to do the research. We're busy. We're doing a lot of things. Everybody's busy every day, doing our jobs and doing everything else, and so what do is we rely on a little snippet in the media, whether it's the newspaper, it's our favorite news program, or something online like Twitter. How many people get their news on Twitter? So you get all this information, you get these little bits and pieces, and that's it. You don't bother doing the research. So all of a sudden, like you said, the public is standing back and they're going, "Holy crap, what happened?" Right? And now is it too late? Could they have been involved earlier? Who's to say?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's funny. I was going to say that I was talking to somebody the other day who got, all their news off of Twitter. And obviously there aren't too many experts in the niche world of bail reform. I'm one of probably a handful in the United States. It's just not something that people think about, and the old saying was you need a good a lawyer, a good heart surgeon, and a good bail bondsman. You'd have everything you need covered in life. But until you need one, you don't really need any of them.
That's perfectly.
Doesn't think about it either.
Yeah, you're exactly right. There's a lot of industries like that, but you know what? You make a great point. You're exactly right. Well, we only have a couple of minutes left. I just wanted to give you the opportunity, Jeff, to just let our listeners know where can they find out more about this particular situation up in New York, and where can they find out more about the American Bail Coalition? I think it's time people really dig in and get to know more.
Absolutely. Go to our website, which is ambailcoalition.org. Same handle. We're on Facebook and Twitter, and we're out there. So if you want to know what's going on, definitely follow us, and you'll be tuned in.
Now, let me ask you this. Can our listeners, obviously, if you're on social media, if they see something, if they are curious about something, or they see something that they think is wrong, I would imagine that you're wide open to accept their notifications.
Absolutely. Victims of bail reforms and others find egregious cases or other interesting cases. They send them to us all the time. So we encourage listeners to do that and get the conversation going.
Fantastic. And the website, best way if they want to reach out to you or contact you?
Yep. Contact information is on the website, ambailcoalition.org.
Fantastic. Well, Jeff, I can't thank you enough for being here. This was new to me. You're absolutely right. And until it's brought to the surface, I think there's a lot of people that don't really know about a lot of this, and it's real important that they start to, because here up in New York and we're in Pennsylvania, boy, it's hitting really close to home. So I really appreciate you being on the program today.
You bet. It was a pleasure.